Hi Stampers, welcome to Learning with Friends. I am Pat Fairless from Fairless Stamp and Flair, and today I have a really fun, simple technique to share with you. It's been around forever, and I had never done it, so I wasn't really sure how it was done. So this week I did some research, watched a lot of videos. There's a lot of videos out there, and I kind of picked and mixed and matched things from different videos because sometimes it was kind of confusing actually. So I found out a way that works for me now. There are actually two ways. What I'm going to show you. One is the super simple method, which is what the first video I saw, and I'm like, oh, this is hardly even worth showing. This is so simple. And then I kept digging into others, and then I'm going to show you what I think is probably the more historically traditional way to make faux leather. I'm going to show you that one too. So let's flip the camera down and get started. So I'm going to show you the super simple one first. And if you are a super simple stamper, you're going to like this. It will add some texture to your card. I'm not convinced it really looks like faux leather or leather, but I like how it looks on the card. So all we're going to do is take a piece of cardstock, and I'm going to do one of each. I've got a pecan pie and a cherry cobbler, just because I used both of them on the card. This was my my first one I did, the super simple method, to make sure I could conquer that one, right? Now, the first thing we need to do is spritz this. And we can spritz it with water, or we can spritz it with alcohol, rubbing alcohol. Any kind of rubbing alcohol works. I've got like a 91%. The main thing that I found a difference in is the amount of time it takes to dry. So we're just going to spritz this until it's pretty wet. And I'm going to do both sides. And then we're just going to crunch it up. Now, this is Stampin' Up! Cardstock, which is fairly sturdy, and it actually is, you have to really squeeze to get it crunched up, and that's it. Now we're going to unroll it and see what it looks like. Kind of open it up, smooth it out. If you want to add a few more crinkles in it, you can just like crinkle an area that looks like it maybe needs some more, and then set it aside to dry, and it is done. Does it get any easier than that? Then you just use it on your card. Now, from an ultimate visual of what it looks like when you're done, I found no difference between water or using the rubbing alcohol. The only difference I found was in the amount of dry time. And you do want to let it set it aside and let it dry. You don't want to open them a little carefully because it will have a tendency to tear. And again, I can crunch it up again if I want to, if I want more crinkles. But let me bring this up here so you can see this. Right now you're seeing a little bit of mottled color because it is wet. But that's it. So it does provide a lot of texture to the card. And here's the card I made using those two pieces. This is the Reindeer Fun stamp set from the mini. And these are the two pieces, obviously. All I did was adhere them down. One hint I would say is when you want to attach these to your cardstock, your card base, wherever you're going to attach it, I would recommend liquid adhesive because it is kind of textured, and so you're going to get a better adherence if you use liquid adhesive because it'll get into the nooks and crannies. My other suggestion is when you're putting something over top of it, like this, I got my little reindeer here and he's on a little die cut. Attach whatever is directly attached to this with dimensionals. Again, because you've got a lot of texture, in here. You can see I'll put it on the side, you can see there's a lot of texture. And that's really what you want out of it. So you don't want to flatten it out by putting something directly down on it. I would just use dimensionals. So that is my first card I'm going to show you. On the inside, I kept it simple, just added a couple of the trees, put a couple trees on the envelope, and that one was good to go. So again, that's the super simple method. Now I'm going to show you what I think is probably the more traditional method, and it looks a little more like faux leather, at least in my opinion, for what my opinion is worth. There are a few more steps, and for this, again, you can use cardstock. You can use, most of the videos I saw, they cut up a brown paper bag, any kind of brown paper. I have this roll of packing paper. A lot of times we get these kind of scrunched up a little bit inside an Amazon box. You can use those. So that's what I chose to use for mine. And we're going to start with, I just cut it off the roll. We're going to start with this, and we're going to do the same thing. We're just going to spritz it, and I'm going to let's use water for this time. What the heck, we'll mix it up a bit. You want a fair amount. On this paper, I only put one coating. So then I didn't do it on the back. I could have, I guess. It's not quite as heavy as the Stampin' Up! Cardstock, which makes it definitely easy to crunch, especially if you got a little bit of arthritis in your hand, like I got in this thumb here. When you unwrap it carefully. This is the wet side. You can see it's a little darker than the light side. I'm going to wrap it once or punch it once more. So I'm just going to spritz this side, and you can do this as many times as you want until it's as crinkled as you want. If you want it not so crinkled, then don't do it too many times. So now, this is the part of the technique that takes time. Like I said, they are all super easy, but it is not a technique you're going to want to do if you need a card in 30 minutes, because you have to let this dry. And you can speed it up by drying it with your heat tool, which works. It doesn't hurt anything. But I did find even that took a fair amount of time with the heat tool on the low setting to dry. So by magic of TV, I already have 2 dry ones here. Now I want to share with you what the difference is. This one is exactly as we just did it. I spritzed it with water, crinkled it a couple times, and let it dry. This one, I added one more step, which some of the videos did that I saw, and they add glycerin to it. I found this at CVS. It's just pure glycerin. And here's the one we just did, and I'll just show you how I did that. You don't need a lot, just put a little bit in your hand, the palm of your hand, and kind of rub them together. This is great for your hands because, man, they get nice and soft. And then just wipe this on your damp cardstock, okay? Or brown paper bag, whatever you're using. And let me clean my hands. My little handy dandy rag here. Because this is the difference. If you see this one and I hold it, it's fairly stiff. This is the one that has the glycerin. Can you see how it's just hanging and flopping back and forth? This one is very soft and pliable. So that is the difference I saw between using glycerin or not. This one really doesn't even crinkle much anymore. This one still, you can still hear it crinkle. This one really doesn't. It feels much different. It doesn't look a lot different. So Again, it's optional. I wanted to try it to see what the glycerin did. So that's why I went and bought some to do it both ways so I could tell you. If you don't mind crinkle and you don't mind a little sticker, I wouldn't spend the money on glycerin. This little jar, which will probably last me forever, costs like $9. That was at CVS or maybe someplace else, but to get it less expensively. So let's just go ahead and use this one. This one is dry. And now we're going to add some aging to this. And the way I want to do that is I'm going to use my direct to paper with my ink pads. And I'm going to use crumb cake, pecan pie, early espresso, and I'm going to add just a smidge of Calypso coral, just to give it a little bit of color. And I'll show it to you on a card. I recommend start from light to dark, and you're just going to take this and very lightly, you're going to wipe it on here. You don't want a lot of it. You're just going to kind of pick up those high areas and add a little bit of color to it. And it picks up the areas of the crinkles. Now, if I were to just take this, and then I'm going to set this aside. If I were to just take this as is and put the next one on, more than likely I'd probably hit the exact same spots. So what I found I like to do is crinkle it up again in between each layer because it brings me new highs and lows. Some of them will stay the same. Just kind of smooth it out a little bit. You do want to be a little gentle when you uncrinkle, especially if it's still wet, because it will tear fairly easily at that point in time. So now I'm going to use my next darker color, which is pecan pie, and I'm going to brush this one. Whoa! Brush this one on there. Just add a little more here and there. There is no rhyme or reason to this. Just add it wherever you like. If that's all you want, stop. You don't have to do multiple colors. The last card I'm going to show you, I used one color. And it was tone on tone, so I used the same color as my cardstock. So now let's take our early espresso. I'll just crinkle it again. Open it up. And touch it with early espresso. This one's pretty dark, so hopefully you can see those. Okay, that is good. So we are done with those. My hands are so soft from the glycerin. And I'm going to use the Calypso coral. And we're going to. Now, if you wanted to, you could spritz this again before you crinkled. If you thought you wanted to get really a lot more crinkles, I didn't find it necessary to really spritz in between. I did one of them that way, and then I came back and wanted to add some more color. That's when I decided to add the Calypso coral. If you do spritz it, this is water-based ink, so it will tend to smear just a bit. But again, that looks wonderful also. So it's kind of one of those things just to play around with. So let's go ahead and just touch it here and there just to add just a smidge of this Calypso coral. I didn't want a lot of it on there, but I wanted just a bit of it. And you'll see when I show you the card why I chose Calypso coral. So that's enough ink, in my opinion. Now, if we want for this to look even more aged, we can take our edges. Before I do this, or before I would suggest you do it, is I would say cut it to whatever size you want it to be at this point in time. Or maybe cut it, I would say, a 1/2 inch larger in all directions, and then you can tear off about 1/4. I will just do it on this one, and I'll just do 2 of the edges so you can see what it looks like with and without on the card I showed you. Or I'm going to show you. You'll see I did it on all 4 sides. But I did cut it to about a 1/2 inch larger, so that when I tore 1/4 off all the way around, I was down to the size I wanted. But we can now take a sponge dauber and go back and grab, I would say, either the early espresso or the pecan pie. The crumb cake probably isn't going to show much. And just take this and kind of ink our edges here. And just darken those edges. And this just kind of really gives it a more aged look. So you can see this is really simple. Other than the drying time, it's very quick. We've got one more step after this, which is a step I liked. Not all videos use this last step, but I liked how it kind of gave it more of a finished appearance. So, all right, so we've got 2 here now that are torn and inked with early espresso. Again, you could use any color you want. And now we're going to cover this with Mod Podge. I have matte Mod Podge. Easy for you to say. This is just what I had. I did not want it to be shiny anyway, so I was kind of glad I had matte. But I just took like a spoonful. Don't need a lot. And just put that on my where's my trash? Looking for my trash. Get my cover back on. Don't want it to dry out. So, okay, so now we're just going to take a brush, clean the spoon a little bit. Get on my way. And we're just going to brush this on. And you're kind of going to want to brush in all directions because you have so many crinkles. You do want it to get down into those crinkles. This does wet your ink, so you can see it's going to smear your ink a little bit. So you need to be careful you don't brush it too much so that you really start smearing your ink. But on the edges there, that's fine. That's just been colored on there for aging anyway, so. And I'm just going to work my way around until the whole thing is covered. Mod Podge kind of seals it, and it does, even though I have matte Mod Podge, it does give it a little bit of sheen, as you will see in the finished card. And I do want to get it kind of in all those nooks and crannies, so that's why I'm sort of going multi-directions. Now, it looks kind of white and creamy at this point, but it does dry clear. If you've used Mod Podge before, you know that. It's kind of a sealant. Can be used as a bit of an adhesive also. So now, here again, not hard, but we have to set this aside to dry. So I'm just going to take this whole sheet here and put it somewhere. Where should I put it? Put it where I sit. That way I'll sit on it afterwards. And I don't know, I've got my glass mat here because I was spritzing, so I don't know. I hope I don't have too much glare. But let me just bring this back in case something is really glaring. There's really ink on here off my mat. That's what's wonderful about a glass mat. If you haven't gotten one of these, you might want to think about it. They are awesome and they clean up really easily. So the card that I made with that is here. So again, here is my faux leather. You can see the Mod Podge, it's very wet at this point. But here's what it looks like when it's dry. You see it around the edges? Very cool, right? I think it's really cool. This is with country flowers. One thing I could point out here on this is I used my blender pens to color these. I just stamped it with shaded spruce, and then I took a lemon lolly Stampin' Write marker, made a line at each vein, and I did one leaf at a time with the lemon lolly. And then I just took my blender pen and kind of pulled the ink in from the stamped edge. If I needed to, I picked up a little extra. But that is background here, faux leather. And here's a little piece here on the inside when I trimmed my final one down to size. So that is the card that uses what I call the more traditional, I guess. I don't know what exactly I would call it. I will have a tutorial that I will put a link to. I call it a more traditional method of faux leather. So that's that card. Here is the super simple method. Really all it is crinkle and crunch. Spritz, crinkle, and crunch. And then flatten it out. And here's one I told you where I just did very little ink added on this. This is basic beige cardstock, Stampin' Up! Cardstock. And after, rather than using the 4 different colors of ink, I just used basic beige and highlighted it. And it gives it just a little bit of variation. I don't know how well you can see that on camera, but in person you can just see that it's there. It's adds a little more depth to it. So this is from Marius Trees, and the inside's just the same. These were made here with the trim on the bottom is made with enamel effects. I just kind of scribbled it on there. So those are the 3 cards. I'd love to know what you think of the faux leather. Like I said, it is super easy to do, but it is not fast simply because you have to wait for things to dry. And at any point as you've created your technique sheet, if you're like, oh, even if after you've got the Mod Podge on there and you think, oh, I wish I'd put a little more Calypso coral, then just go ahead and add it. You can go back and forth as many times as you want. If you do add something after you Mod Podged it, I would put a light layer of Mod Podge on just to kind of seal it in. So I hope you like that. Let's flip my camera back and we will wrap this up. So I don't know, I hope that didn't take too long. I hope you give it a try. It's, like I said, it's super easy. It's just not fast because you have to wait for things to dry, and you can speed it up with a heat tool, but still it seems to stay damp for a while. And if you use water, it's going to stay damp longer than if you use the alcohol. So if you liked it, you give me a thumbs up. I would love that. But more importantly, share it with somebody else. And who knows, they may find it interesting and want to give it a try too. So I will sign off for now, and we will see you next week with something else. Have a good one. God bless.